Hello, this is Jason Bofetti, Senior Program Officer in the Division of Research Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is the 2004 webinar for Scholarly Editions and Translations. I'm the current lead for the Scholarly Transitions program, and this presentation will help you get started in applying for this program for the coming year in December, and we hope that you will find this useful as you think about applying. This is a word by way of disclaimer. The following slides were used to supplement a public oral presentation for potential NEH applicants. They are not intended to provide complete information about the NEH's programs, and they do not constitute an official statement of NEH policy. For current information about NEH programs, including eligibility requirements and the dates of deadlines, please consult the guidelines posted on the NEH website at neh.gov. NEH is a U.S. federal agency that receives its funding from Congress. Our agency overall funds projects at a rate of about 17%. In this program, we fund about 25% of the applications that have come to us in the past 10 years. We do fund projects that are returning projects, projects that have been funded previously by the NEH in this program, but a majority of applications that we fund are first-time projects, as are the majority of applications we receive. The best place to start to learn about this program is on our program landing page at NEH. You can find the address here. You may have already found it at NEH.gov. There's a link to that project you can find here. This box that I'm showing you, of course, is the landing page, which gives most of the information about the program, including its application dates, its awards, and you'll also see this has been updated from last year. We've had a website redesign, so you might need to find new ways of navigating here. But this is the program for this year as it's been updated and with some slight changes, which I'll talk about. This program is on a 2-year cycle, so we're unlikely to go through major changes next year, but there have been some minor changes for this year, which I'll talk about in a moment. This lists the program deadlines throughout the coming year. You will see that the deadline for this year is a little bit later than it was last year by a week. The application deadline is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, no later than 11:59 p.m., which is Eastern Time. So you must get your applications in by midnight of that date. Before that date, though, there's draft reviews may be received by the end of this month, September 30th. There's more information in the guidelines about what constitutes a draft and information about submitting a draft review for staff to look at and give you feedback on before the deadline. Applications that are reviewed in this program will receive notification of their funding decisions before the end of August of next summer. The earliest date that a project could start would be October 1st of next year, 2025, and the latest date that a project could start if they apply this coming December would be September 1st of 2026. So what is a Scholarly Editions and Translations project? We define it as editing, annotating, and translating foundational humanities texts that are vital to generating new scholarship but are inaccessible or only available currently in inadequate editions or translations. The NEH has funded editions and translations of some of the most significant historical, literary, philosophical, and music texts, but any works from any humanities field may be the subject of an edition. So we do receive projects in the social sciences that are under humanistic review. We do receive projects in other performing arts, including theater. But the primary thing here is that these texts need to be texts that are useful for humanities scholars that will advance scholarship. So the primary goal is humanities scholars. They may also be useful for more general humanities audiences or even for students, but you must make the case from the outset that this is a project that will have an impact on scholarship and make the case that this is a text or set of texts that either needs an addition or translation to make it more usable, more accessible, and make it possible for scholars to use it in their research in a way that perhaps currently, either because they're in an archive and can't be easily accessed, or in the kind of condition or in handwriting that may be difficult unless you're an expert to be able to read them. These are the types of projects that we will do best in this program and satisfy this definition. What I've created here is a bit of a chart to, as you think about your project, think about applying, if you may be at the early stages of applying or early stages of considering applying, some things you might want to ask yourself first to see whether you might be a good fit for this program and have to answer some of the important questions you'll need to answer in an application as you write it. The first question on the first topic would be the significance of the text. Why is an addition or translation important for this text or set of texts? Will it be used mainly by many scholars over a long period of time for research purposes? Many texts that may be out there that are inaccessible or inadequate may not have a very large audience, may only be used once for maybe one really good book on the subject, or perhaps used by yourself to do an important project that you want to work on. But you do want to be able to determine and be able to answer, can this text or this edition or this translation be used again and again by scholars and is not simply sort of a one-time use or very limited audience projects. We do fund projects that are smaller, that are for smaller audiences, for a smaller set of scholars, but you need to make the case that there's more than just a very narrow, say, just a few people in the world that would be interested in needing and reusing this text in a print or digital format. The second question or set of questions you'll want to ask is, who is the audience for this? Who will be using this edition or translation? That's an important first question. That is about significance, certainly. How many scholars will be interested in using this? But you should also ask and press a bit more on whether there are other audiences possible for the text, even beyond the ones that you initially considered, that might broaden the audience for what you propose to do. Some texts that are largely literary may in fact have a historical audience, or texts that are religious may in fact have a philosophical audience. So you want to think a bit about that, especially as you make your case in your application for that. And it's good to do this before you begin writing, because one step you could take is to consult with members of some of those potential audiences and find out more about what they need from an edition. What will they be looking to use it to do? And that will affect the kind of critical apparatus, the introductions, the footnoting, the annotations that you will develop. So it's good to establish this audience and also audience usage before you begin. And that brings me to format. We fund many projects that are print only. We have fund projects that are digital only, and even some that have products that are both. Give some thought to how your audience might be using your text, and therefore whether it lends itself to one or the other, maybe exclusively, or maybe it lends itself to doing both. And that's an important question to answer for yourself before you apply. You might get further feedback if you don't get funded the first time from your panelists that might tell you maybe if you should think more about one format or another, but it's good to have a rationale. Does digital make the most sense? It's not always the right choice for every project. There's a case for sustainability in print form, but there's also a case for kind of the usability of a digital format project, where there's going to be a desire to do searches and be able to really probe those texts in a more rigorous way that only the internet or some kind of web format would allow. And then, of course, what also will determine what format you want to go after would be, what skills do you have, and what skills can you hope to bring on to your project from other scholars who might be able to do the digital portion of it, particularly. What do you have access at your institution or to other people in your project that will be able to bring that expertise to make it a truly digital and usable product? And then that brings us to sustainability. What you need to think a bit about, maybe more so with digital, But even with books, are you creating something that will stand the test of time, will be available beyond the time that you've created the project? Are you thinking about where the project will be stored? If it's a digital project, what server space, who will provide it, and on what basis? And in what way will that project be both financially sustainable, if it will require updating or require server space, and what ways might you have to think about the long term of digital usage and the fact that projects oftentimes need to have a new technology used to make them usable with software updates and with the web, with changes to the web and the changes even of what your users might want down the road as you go along. So thinking about a bit about what your long range goals are. It might not be that you're producing something that you expect to last forever, but you have a sense of how long you think your project will last and be sustainable for scholarly use, especially if it's not going to be a print edition. To give you some sense of the range of projects we funded recently, so not this year, but this past year, 2023, these are some projects. We were able to fund 21 of the 61 applications we received in 2023. One was a critical edition of the first 50 chapters of the Book of Psalms. Another one was the annotated Harvard Lectures of philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. A digital edition of the letters of early American writer Catherine Maria Sedgwick. An annotated translation of a Native American newspaper written in Dakota. A documentary edition and translation of the papers of Albert Einstein. That gives you a sense of the range of projects that we fund. So what is a scholarly editions project? What are the details of what we fund in this program? We say most work leading to a scholarly product. So not all work. So we don't fund things like printing and marketing and promotion of scholarly editions, but we do fund the work leading up to the products. We do fund print, digital, or a combination of both. We do not have an absolute preference for that, but you need to make a case for which way you're going to go and why. We fund texts that are inaccessible or inadequate. So not just any text necessarily makes a case for significance if there already are usable texts that are available, whether print or digital. So you need to make the case for inaccessibility and inadequacy, perhaps of an older translation, say that needs to be modernized, up to new standards, up to more recent standards. We do fund projects that are in a foreign language or in English. One exception to that is we don't fund projects that are translations from English into another language. So we would fund a project that was in Latin and the text itself was not going to be translated, but would be ultimately for scholars who would read in Latin, or a project that might be a translation from Latin or Spanish or French into English. These projects must have content that advances humanities scholarship. So the case must be made that perhaps a text that might be a more minor work of a particularly important figure still deserve an edition because they would advance scholarship if they were made available more broadly. And that you make a case for the content and you have additional content you're adding to the text. So we don't fund mere transcription projects. We would fund projects that add scholarly content in addition to the transcription or the translation. So added content, annotations, introductions, a scholarly apparatus that would help explain or at least help scholars better understand and either the creation of the text or the composition of the text or the origins of the text. These projects must be collaborative in nature, so we don't fund single applicant projects where there's only one person working alone. You could apply for scholarly editions or translations projects in our regular fellowships program if it was just one person working on a text. These are institutional grants, not individual grants, unlike our fellowships program, which does actually fund individuals to work on a research project or scholarly editions project. These are awards that go to institutions, usually colleges and universities, although we do have some other types of institutions as well that can apply. And then one last thing to mention here is we do fund planning stage projects. So if you're at the early stages of still developing your plan of work and even putting together your team, we do fund projects. We always have, but we've made it more explicit in the last 5 years to say that we fund early stage projects, planning stage, that for up to 2 years for $65,000 total, perhaps to take time away from your teaching duties or other administrative duties to work on your project, bring people together, travel, gather folks, pay small honoraria to help you think through a project. What makes for a competitive project? This is not just about projects that would be eligible, but actually competitive in this program. One, that you make a case for the significance of the project, that you can explain what makes this text or figure or collection of texts, what gives them significance. Secondly, the case for translation, or the case for the language. If you decide to say not translate it but leave it in the original, have you made a good case for that? And if you have translated it, why is it important that there be a translation into English? Have you made a case for the scholarly content? What is in here that has not been available before? Perhaps you're doing a set of letters that a portion of them have been produced before in edition, but never say the whole corpus of letters that a figure has produced. What is the case for sort of doing a comprehensive edition, say? Do you have the appropriate level of collaboration with others? Do you have the right people with the right set of skills? Is there any missing expertise that would really enhance the project, especially if you're doing a digital project, that you have people on the team that can speak to those digital requirements, but also, do you have the right language skills or the right expertise from the range of fields that are represented in the text? Do you provide us with a detailed work plan so it can be evaluated by peer reviewers what it is you'll be doing with the time, and you have a timeline that makes sense for the project. It's both realistic, if perhaps with enough ambition that there's enough work to be done during the plan of work. And is there a clear product? It's important that you have defined what your product is going to be, so that those who are looking at your project can clearly see what will be the result. Either if it's by the end of the grant or within a few years of the grant's completion, what is the grant product? So what projects would be ineligible for this program? Sometimes we get questions about whether a project is a good fit at all for this program. First, projects that are only transcription digitization. So you have a text, you want to make it available on the web, but you don't plan on doing any scholarly content. You're not going to be writing introductions or creating annotations. It's simply digitizing or transcribing existing text to make them available for usage without comment. Those would not be eligible. As I said a moment ago, translation projects where the translation is being done from one language, say from English or from Italian, but into another language other than English. So we don't currently fund projects where the translation is into something other than English. We don't fund projects where there's lacking new scholarly apparatus. We have had projects come to us, or I've been asked by projects who want to apply. We have an edition of, say a French edition of a text, and we want to take and translate the scholarly apparatus that was in the French into English. So there wouldn't be any new work done, new notes added, new annotations added, new introductions. It'd rather be the translation of that scholarly content into English. No, that wouldn't be enough. We would need to have maybe additional work done for an English-speaking audience that might tease out some of the important nuances maybe of the translation for an English-speaking audience and go beyond merely a one-for-one translation of a set of scholarly apparatus for a text. In 2023, we made it clear, and this is partly through experience, that we don't fund editions of living authors. So we found that when an author still could be working, it's often hard to make a case that the edition that's being created is sort of would be the final one. There could be additional texts, and also there hasn't been enough time to sort of evaluate the long-term impact of a scholar if they're or someone's humanities scholarship when they're still living, or they so we've made that as a rule. They need to be those who have sort of their corpus is done and they can be evaluated. And then this past year, this is a change in the program, made it more clear. I think, again, we do not fund anthologies or source books. What an anthology, what the problem has been is that these are very infrequently are they competitive, because there's a lot of doubt about whether what's included in an anthology is sort of everything that could be included, or the case for some things and not others. There's just too many questions about whether anthologies or source books also have an audience beyond student learners or even advanced learners. Is it really about creating a background text for an area, or is it really generating new scholarship? And we've just decided to make this something we don't fund because it's so difficult for these projects to be successful in this program. And I think it doesn't do a service to those who apply when the odds are very long that these will be seen as true additions. For a full list of restrictions, please see page 34 of Notice of Funding Opportunity. And here I'll turn in a second to actually showing you some of those places in the guidelines or where to find those guidelines. Bringing you back again to the program guidelines and application instructions page. So if we go back to the landing page of a Notice of Funding Opportunity, you will find some tabs that you'll want to, where you can find some of the most important parts of your application process. So if you see here under application instructions, I've circled it here, and you click on that tab, it'll open up a series of steps. And the first step you'll have to click on to open is review your application package, step 1. And down below here where I've marked it is sort of the document that'll walk you through what to put in an application. Here it's with the arrow for this PDF document. The first one are application materials, and you will find the document here that looks like this. It's a PDF that you can download and save to your local drive. This is the first page of what it looks like, and it starts all the important information you'll need as you apply, showing you, of course, that this is this program has 2 deadlines in the next 2 years. This December, it's on December 4th, which is a Wednesday, and then the following year, 2025, will be a deadline. We believe December 3rd, 2025. This is unlikely to change, but this is where you can plan. If you decide not to apply this year, there will be another deadline the following year. And what follows from this page is a series of the information that you'll need to apply to this program. We sometimes refer to it as the guidelines, or the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO for short. Another important document you'll find here on the landing page under the Applications Instructions tab, Step 1 Review, you'll find the Program Frequently Asked Questions. And so if you go down below the Notice of Funding Opportunity, you'll find the third thing there after the application package itself, which you'll need when you go to apply-to-grants.gov. The third thing there is the notice, the frequently asked questions, which is another PDF that does answer frequently asked questions for this program. And hopefully, if it's a good starting place, if you have something that wasn't clear enough in the guidelines, you'll get your answers there. If you go back to the landing page again, you will find a list of the things that have changed since the last guidelines, at least the major changes, or at least relatively major changes to this program, so that if you've looked at last year's guidelines or you're wondering if anything has significantly changed since then, these are some of the things that you might want to be aware of. First of all, we've made, this is the list that you'll find there, and I'll talk about these in a minute. So what is new for 2024? The first one is that individuals designated as a project director for scholarly editions and translation projects may not serve as a project director for any other scholarly editions and translations project during the period of performance. A project director may serve as a co-director for other projects. I think the point here is that if you are going to apply, if you apply for a project and if you're successful, you will only be able to serve as a project director, the lead director, for one project at a time. You would have to have that project completed before you were to take up another one. So theoretically, if you were going to be applying for 3 years and you knew you wanted to apply in year 4, you could apply during year 3 as long as there's no overlapping period of performance to continue the project on without a gap. But the important thing is that sort of one project at a time per person. But you may serve there are a few cases where we have project directors who have co-directors who then themselves direct other projects or potentially direct another project. As long as you're not the lead project director, but a co-director, you could potentially apply to lead a different project or be a co-director on still a third project. But the main thing is we want one person responsible for a project at a time and not be trying to manage more than one scholarly editions projects. I think for most people, one is plenty, but we want to make sure that they're in cases where someone might want to try to run both or even apply for 2 at a time. We do not want to have too many applications or have more than one application from a person at any time. Secondly, the projects that are not applying for a planning grant, we would consider to be what might be called an implementation grant, although we haven't used that term before. But basically, there are 2 types of projects that we'd be running. One is the planning grant, which is the first time planning grant, and that any subsequent application you would make in this program would be implementation grant. So yes, it is the case, I would say, that projects that receive a planning grant should not be applying again for another planning grant, but must be then considered moving for implementation at that point. Continuing on, some of the things that have changed since last year's guidelines. We specifically mentioned that undergraduate students are prohibited from performing translation work for projects. We've seen this come in with applications in the past where projects want to use undergraduate students either in their coursework or as a member of the project, paid even, to do translation work. We've just heard too much feedback from those who reviewed applications that projects that use undergraduate students to do translations are unlikely to be regarded by the field as sort of trustworthy translations, even if there's additional work done by staff to sort of review those translations. Just the belief is that projects that are meant to be scholarly resources should also be generated by scholars who have more experience than what an undergraduate translator would be able to do. Secondly, the program does not support the preparation of anthologies or source books. I've mentioned this already. And then third, on this list of this partial list, applicants receiving matching funds, and this is relatively minor, must raise and certify all eligible gifts and pledges 6 months before the end of the period of performance. So just to make you aware, if you do apply for matching funds, you will have to come up with that money before the end of the project. In fact, you have to come up with it before 6 months before. So if that proves daunting, that's a reason perhaps not to apply for matching funds. But that was a policy that came to us from our grants office. Just by way of overview, let me kind of walk through what the notice of funding opportunity consists of. You'll see that the notice is divided into A through H. The main sections that you'll be working with the most probably, especially for the project director and getting ready to submit the application, will be sections B through E, but particularly the application submission portion starts on page 8. So that's what I'll be talking about in a moment to give you more information about how to apply. Probably by now you're already aware of our funding amounts, but just to give you a sense of that and maybe explain some things that weren't clear, I would say the majority of our projects come to us for 3 years for $300,000. So that would be 3 years at $100,000 per per year for outright funds. You could any project could ask for up to an additional $50,000 per year. So total, that would be $450,000 for 3 years. If you're requesting the total amount you could for matching funds each year. I would say most projects don't ask for matching funds because there is an additional requirement to raise those, and so that does prove a challenge, or can prove a challenge, and it's an extra work to do. So, but I would say most projects do receive just the total or the maximum amount of outright funds. Projects also do come to us for the number of months less than that, and we simply tell projects that we prorate that. So if you want to have an 18-month project, you wouldn't be able to ask for a full 100,000 for both years. You would have to prorate that 100,000 for the second year to make it match the 18 months you'd be asking for. We don't require that you ask for matching money, and we don't require that you ask for exactly 1 or 2 or 3 years, although again that's fairly typical to go on a 12-month basis. But we do say, though, if you're going to ask for one of these for a planning stage grant, we require that you give us a project that would be for either a minimum of 1 year, maximum of 2 years for $65,000. Even if you think that you might not need a full year, I think it's always a good idea to ask for the time for a full year, and then be expeditious, obviously, with what you need to do with that time. But the maximum amount of any planning grant would be $65,000. As I had mentioned earlier, there are other kinds of, even though typically we receive applications from colleges and universities, there are other kinds of eligible applicants, including U.S. nonprofits, of course, accredited public institutions of higher learning, or private institutions of higher learning, state and local governments, federally recognized Native American tribes. What are not eligible, though, are other federal agencies, nonprofit institutions, and individuals. There was a time when this program did support individuals, but we don't do that any longer. Now you must come in through an institution that fits one of these categories. One thing to know about eligibility in this program, we try to be as generous as possible, letting applications go through the process of review, even if we as staff may have some concerns about whether they are competitive. But there are 3 things that will definitely get your application rejected before it goes to review. The first is that it is late. That is, it was not received by the NEH on time by the deadline. So get those applications in preferably before the last day. It can be a rush on grants.gov at midnight of the day of the submission, whether it's grants.gov applications to us or to anyone who's applying through grants.gov in the federal government. Typically their deadlines are midnight, so it's important to try to get your application in, if you can, a few days early, but we cannot accept applications that were not submitted on time. Secondly, applications that are missing things that we consider required attachments or required parts of the application, we cannot consider those for funding, and that can also include applications that are just simply not eligible according to our rules of what projects can be for. So obviously, if it's a project that has no scholarly apparatus planned, we would not consider that eligible, and therefore it would be non-responsive to our rules. And then third, a project that had formatting problems, and by formatting we say NEH will not consider an application that exceeds mandatory page limits or deviate from formatting instructions. So if we say, as we do, that you can have a 12-page narrative, if you give us a 14-page narrative, or even a 12.5-page narrative, we have to declare those ineligible because they did not follow the formatting requirements. So who is eligible to be a project director for a project? This program has had a long history of scholars leading these projects, and we want the project directors to be scholars of these texts and not university administrators. We want the people who are leading these projects to be able to speak to the significance of the content and the sort of the day-to-day editorial work that's done. And so we have we ask that the lead project director be a scholar. We do allow the designation of co-directors in this program, provided there is at least one person designated as the project director. There's no limit on the number of co-directors there could be if they're all involved, and even though we know sometimes work is simply shared between various co-directors, there will need to be one person assigned as the director who is ultimately responsible for things like reporting of the project. Project directors can be non-citizens and non-residents if it turns out that the best person to lead a project fits in that category. What we do want to see is the institution have some kind of agreement in place with someone who's a project director, and also obviously the institution has to sign off and be willing to sign off on someone who might not in fact be a member of that institution being the director of a project. We do not permit degree candidates to be project directors. In fact, this is something throughout really all of our programs in the Division of Research that we want directors to have already received a degree. It doesn't have to be a PhD, but we don't want project directors that are still currently working on their degrees. We say that we want one project director per project, or one project per project director at a time. You could be a PD, a co-PD on various projects, but we do not want anyone leading a project more than one project as a project director at a time. And kind of connected with that, no overlapping awards. So if you were to apply and to receive, say, a fellowship from our division to say work on a book related to your project, you would have to step away from this project and could not serve during the year that you were a fellow on the other project. And so we would prefer not to have our project directors to be applying for more than one grant, but certainly you can't serve on more than one award in this program at a time. And that's partially because with a fellowship, that's considered a full-time project, and there really isn't time to also be doing this scholarly editions project at the same time. Let me now go over the application and submission process. So in order to apply for this program, you will have to download and have an account on grants.gov. So there's an application package that you'll download, and to that application package you'll be submitting various components that you'll work on and have to be able to save as PDFs that you will then upload to your application. So there's information about the different parts of the application starting on page 10. The narrative portion, which in some ways is the heart and soul of your project, of your is as you describe what you'll be doing for us, that starts on page 11. And that's the 12 pages that you'll be writing to kind of go through what your project is, its significance, how you'll do it, who will be working with you, and ultimately your grant product. There are also additional attachments that will need to be added to your application that we ask for, things like a separate work plan attachment, a bibliography, and then some appendices, and then ultimately a sample of the work that you'll be doing for this program. And there's more information about that further in. And then lastly, you'll need to create a budget for your project, and more instructions are available about that on page 21 of that. But as I said, the heart of your project, the heart of your application will be this narrative, which is the 12 pages, single spaced, 1-inch margins, in an 11-point font. So we don't specify the exact font, but we're trying to obviously make this fair for everyone and have a kind of standardized narrative format so that everyone has the same amount of space to explain their project. We don't go through and really check font types and sizes, except to sort of eyeball them, that there's nothing too exaggerated going on that might violate this policy. But the main thing is that you not have more than 12 pages, and so be really very careful when you, especially when you convert your, say, your Word document to a PDF, making sure that it doesn't save it into a PDF that actually exceeds the 12 pages. I've seen that happen a couple times where because of font substitution, you get instead of a 12-page narrative, you end up with 12 pages and 1 paragraph narrative, and we need you to be really careful about that, because that would be a violation of our the limit policy that we have. So double check that before you submit your narrative. To delve a little bit deeper into the narrative itself, so this is the format of the narrative we asked for, and the order of things we want you to discuss. The significance and impact, which will take about 2 pages. The history and productivity, which will take about 2. Your collaborators, your method and execution, a kind of prose work plan telling us what you're going to use the time to do, and then lastly, the discussion of your final product and dissemination, which will take about 2 pages. So overall, you'll find this discussion on pages 11 through 15 of the notice of funding opportunity, and it'll tell you very specifically what we want you to talk about in each of these parts of your narrative. And not surprisingly, these parts of your narrative line up pretty well with the review criteria, the things that we'll be asking the reviewers to look at when they look at your application and determine the strength of it. They'll be looking at significance, method and execution, the collaborators, your work plan and productivity, and then lastly, your publication goals. You can find the full review criteria that the reviewers use on page 35 of the NOFO. As I come to toward the end here, let me just talk a bit about the review process for your application, which I think people like to know a bit about. It helps as you prepare and think about your audience. So we have, as I just mentioned, the review criteria is listed on the top of page 35. Details of what we ask panelists to review in your application are then listed there, and then the process itself that we use is also there in the guidelines to look at, to discuss how we review your application. The first and in many ways the most important of the 5 criteria is significance. And we say in the criteria, the intellectual significance of the proposed text for humanities scholars, the need for scholarly additions or translation of the material, and the addition's potential to stimulate new scholarship. So each of the things I bold there, I could gloss a bit, but I think that the important thing to really realize is that you make the case for the significance for humanities scholars, and that there is an ongoing need for an addition. Either because what exists is not sufficient, but also, and then lastly, that you make the case that it has the ability to stimulate new research. So you'll want to talk about that in the significance and impacts section, how you foresee the availability of these translations or editions impacting scholarship in the field. The second review criteria is methods and execution, the appropriateness of the selection criteria, editorial practices and translations policies, the accuracy and the quality of the samples, the clarity of expression in the application, the significance and quality of annotations, and for translations projects, the accuracy and quality of the translations. So there are two main things being evaluated here. One is the actual way that you describe how you're going to do your work, the policies you have in place to do accurate translation or transcription. And then there's also an evaluation of the sample you'll be provided as one of your attachments. So we ask for a short sample, and that will be evaluated as well by those who read your applications, looking to see that you're proving that you can do a good job with your project on the text. The third criteria is the collaborators, the qualifications, expertise, and levels of commitment of the project directors and collaborators. There are many different types of projects that we see, but there needs to be some evidence that there'll be some amount of commitment and level of participation of the members of the project, such that the project is not simply a very spare time thing, but something where a lot of work is being dedicated, and we're ultimately supporting time away from other duties to work on this project. So I think that making a good case for both who's involved and why, and also that you make it clear how much time, either as a percentage of their time or percentage of their year, that they'll be spending on the project. The fourth criteria is work plan and productivity. And this is, we say, the thoroughness and feasibility of the work plan, likelihood the proposed project will be completed successfully within the stated time frame, and the record of productivity if previously funded. Projects that come to us that don't really spell out what they'll spend the time doing, or how they'll spend their time, or the process and who'll do what, have a much lower chance of getting funded than those projects that are able to sort of explain sort of a timeline that makes it seem like a viable project, where everything has been sort of thought out, who'll do what, when, and how the project will proceed during the 1, 2, or 3 years. And also that there's a sense that the team has either done this work before or has the ability to complete this project in the time frame given. And then lastly, because we do have some projects who do return to us for more than one grant, that there's evidence that they've been successful before with hitting their goals and their timelines. And then lastly, publication goals, the soundness and sustainability of the dissemination plans for producing an edition in print, digital, or a combination of formats. So there's sort of two things here. Again, this both the fact that you have a clear grant product, and you've defined what you're going to produce, and that you've made a case that you've thought about how it's going to be sustainable. Obviously, it's a bit easier with a print edition to say when, you don't really even need to say that it will go to a library and therefore it'll be published and it'll be available to scholars. Obviously, you do want to think a little bit about who's going to be printing an edition, who's going to be publishing it, because that will make it possible to imagine the project getting out there to a wide audience. But in the case of editions that are digital only, or a combination of print and digital, you need to talk a little bit about what plans you have for making it a sustainable long-term project that can be available for scholars for some period of time going into the future, even after the project is complete. It might be useful for you to know how your application is reviewed. We do invite each year 4 to 5 reviewers per application panels to review the applications that come in, and we have different reviewers each year to do that job, so we don't repeat reviewers. You'll get reviewed by sort of a fresh eyes every time you apply if you don't get funded the first time out. You should assume that your audience are not experts in your specific area. So these are interdisciplinary panels oftentimes, but you can assume some degree of experience either doing translation or scholarly editions work by many of them. So they will sort of be able to understand the way that these projects are done. And we try to cover as much as possible the languages that are expertise. So if a project comes into us and it's going to be say a Latin language project, we try to make sure we have at least one reviewer who is able to read it in the original Latin and be able to assess the quality. It's not always possible to get someone for every language, especially when we have more than we can cover with 4 or 5 reviewers, but we do our best. The second aspect of this is that we typically have between 4 or 5, or even recently as many as 6 panels meeting. So these are interdisciplinary panels. They may be geographically put together or put together by discipline. We find some way to get a good core of reviewers who have some overlapping expertise on a set of applications to review these. But you should think of your audience as being sort of educated in a kind of general sense, but perhaps might need some explanation about your specific field to understand significance. So think about the fact that not all of your panelists will be experts in your area. These panels meet to review all applications on a panel on 6 separate panels or 5 separate panels in March, and they only have these panelists would only have application access to your newest application and not your past years. So you should don't need to say that you've applied before if you apply more than once. They won't know that unless you raise that issue. If, however, you've been successful before and you receive past NEH funding, then they would know that, because you need to talk about your productivity, but they wouldn't necessarily know your whole or need to know your whole application history. As I mentioned at the outset, this program does accept drafts for review. Our deadline for this program is Monday, September 30th, 2024, again by midnight. If you would like to submit a draft review, which is a shortened version of your application, not a full application, these are optional. You don't have to do it. We don't share whether you've submitted a draft or not within the review process, and certainly you don't need to do it to apply, but it can be helpful as you think through your project to get some staff feedback on what you're thinking about at this stage. It's most helpful probably though to first-time applicants who have never applied in this program before. If you are planning on applying, if you're applying again, if this is not your first time applying to this program and you've been unsuccessful, we do ask you to start with the comments you receive from your panelists, which you can request to look at before you submit a draft review, and then do talk in your draft review about how you've adjusted how you perhaps changed your project to accommodate some of the concerns that were raised in the past review. A draft review is, like I said, not a full narrative or even a full application. Certainly, what we're asking for is about 6 pages, and it could be sort of the starting point that you as you're working on a narrative. But it's 6 pages, maximum single spaced, and we ask you for some information. You can find more about what we ask in the funding opportunity, but in short, we ask for sort of why do we ask for you to explain significance, tell us what stage the project is currently at, and what the money is going to be used to do. Is it you're hiring folks to work on the digital edition? Are you making sure you have time to take away from your teaching responsibilities to do this? Ultimately, what is the money being used for? But we don't do a budget review, and so you don't need to have a budget ready for us to look at, because in fact we cannot review budgets at this stage. Here are some of the conditions of a draft review. So we only accept 1 review per project, per deadline. If you've previously applied to this program and been rejected, or if you've been successful, and you need to tell us in a cover letter what you've changed about your project since the last time you applied. How have you changed it? How have you addressed panelist concerns? We do review these in the order that we receive them. So if you submit them sooner, you should get an answer back from us sooner. And since we'll be receiving these by the end of September, our plan is to review them all during October, and our goal as staff is to get them back to you before November 1st. And you'll be sending these not to me personally, but to this editions mailbox, editions at NEH.gov, and then we'll put them in a you'll get a response when you've submitted them, and then we'll put them in a group and review them in the order we received. If you have further questions about this program or want to talk about your idea for a project, here is some contact information. Here's some contact information for 2 of us who can certainly answer your questions. This is my email address, Jason Boffetti, jboffetti@NEH.gov, and my colleague also works in this program as a program officer and chairs many of our panels, Suha Kutsia. And she's particularly helpful for projects doing translation, because many of the ones that she ultimately reviews on the panel with the panelists are those in sort of the translation side of things. And you can reach her at this email address. Thank you for your attention during this presentation. I hope this has been helpful for you and that you are able to use some of this information as you go forward, and we look forward to seeing an application from you. And please do reach out to us if you have more questions we can answer and help you craft an application that's likely to be successful in this program.